Well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Hello, everybody. What we have here is a piece of shagbark hickory from a very large log that had been sitting for about 12 years out in the back of a friend's property. I decided to take a whack at it and just see what I could do with it. It actually had a lot of good hardwood in it. However, I think you'll see as we progress along that the wood is very porous. I think from the time that it's been sitting on the ground for so long. This is a very large tree, by the way. It was over 30 inches in width, and it had about, I'll say maybe 3 to 5 inches of rotted wood on the outside, but the inside was solid as a rock. Here I am getting started with my 40/40 grind 5/8 inch bowl gouge. The other thing that I noticed about this wood is that it was still pretty wet with moisture, even though the wood had aged and looked seasoned enough. It was still pretty waterlogged. It had a lot of moisture inside of it. So you'll notice a lot of darker grain coming out from the moisture in the wood. This was a relatively fun piece of wood to turn. It wasn't so stringy as it was very porous, so there's a lot of little catches on the surface of the wood when you rub your fingers over it. It's not the smoothest, but it certainly is very pretty once it's cut into. Flattening the bottom and starting my base angle for this piece. My goal here was to turn a nice large bowl from this, and I think you'll find that that wasn't exactly to plan. Marking out the tenon. Using a pair of calipers for this, I find that to be about the easiest for me. I can't really eyeball it very well. And I have to say the tenon and mortise type of setup has taken me a little bit of practice to get that down. And I still kind of mess it up. So, as long as it stays, right? That's what's important. Shaping the outside of the bowl. Nice smooth curve. Again, thank you all for your comments on previous videos. If you really like what you're seeing here, please subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. I want to share my experiences. Finishing up just the base of it and about ready to turn it over. So you can see it does really have a pretty grain to it. Now the jaws on this are 100 millimeters. Wanted to go with a larger tenon for this. I like the larger jaws now, the more I use them. Remember those scenes in Dukes of Hazzard when the video would freeze right before something important happened? So here I'm just marking out the little cuts that I'm going to do with the 40/40 grind. I just wanted to kind of get the steps started before I switched over. Kind of makes it a little bit easier to get started. I'll do that from time to time depending on how things are rolling. They don't call that foreshadowing for nothing, huh? I realized what happened was there were two parts of the wood that were kind of joined together, and that seam between the two pieces of wood just decayed. And I didn't realize that when I went to go turn it, and that decay just was a weak spot, and it just flew right off. We'll just call this a happy little accident. It wasn't an entirely catastrophic failure, but I decided to go ahead and just leave it sit on the lathe. And I let it just dry. Dry natural is going to move however it's going to move. And I think that actually worked in my favor a little bit. It reduced its moisture content by quite a bit. And doing so, I decided I was going to go ahead and cut it down to a bit of a smaller bowl. It was such a bummer because I was really looking forward to such a larger piece. We'll make lemons from this lemonade. So going back to shaping the outside and working on the inside. I have more of this wood, so I'm planning to do more pieces with it. Hopefully that all works out the way that I intend. I will be much more careful to watch for that type of flaw in the wood. So this is one of those woods that has a lot of ray cells in it. There is a really good description of what grain looks like on a website that I have linked below in the comments. Highly recommend reading up on it if you're interested. Ray cells are the ones that kind of go across the grain and they create lots of pores. This piece of wood is very heavily laden with pores, and because they were decomposed or decayed in a certain fashion, I suppose, they made for a very open pore structure. So I tried my best to work with them the best I could. I did sand the outside to down to 600 grit. Wanted to get it at least somewhat smooth and really bring the grain out. Now this is my makeshift jam chuck that the design I kind of picked up online, but I put my own little twist on it. The black surface that you see is a specialized rubber that's used in digital printing. Surface of the rubber is very grippy, which makes for a perfect material for a flat-faced jam chuck. Get it lined up. About as centered as I can eyeball it, really. I'm not looking for perfection, just at least some sort of centering. I don't know if you could tell or not, but the wood has already started changing shape even as I'm turning it here. And that's because of the high moisture content. And it's just really starting to dry out very, very quickly. So I'm trying to get the base at least turned up to a nice shape at the bottom before it decides to change shape anymore on me. With the bowl and the jam chuck, I go ahead and take little nibbles at the tenon, trying to get rid of it, testing the wood to make sure it's not going to go flying off. Interestingly enough, there is just enough pressure between the live end center and the jam chuck. This keeps it from moving. Make sure that that bowl is nice and tight against the jam chuck. So I was able to chew down and get the rough shape I was looking for. I went ahead and left just a little nib that I could cut off by hand. Again, I gave this a nice little smooth foot, kind of pleasing when it's sitting on the surface of a table or something. Get that rest out of the way so I can finish sanding it. Again, went back through the grits up to 600, just trying to make sure that it's consistent with the rest of the sanding. And there's the look of it before I take it off the jam chuck. All right, remove it from the jam chuck, and then we'll cut it by hand using my surface pull saw. This blade is very thin and designed to work on the surface of materials so that you don't scratch up the surface really bad. Very flexible. Went back over it again up to 600 grit, making sure it's nice and smooth and flat so that I could then burn in the branding. Little blast of air just to get rid of some of the dust. Smoke them if you got them. And one little final burnish just to get rid of any burn marks. Kind of smooth off that surface of the branding a little bit. Now I used tried and true varnish oil for this. This is a very thick, viscous oil-based finish. It is completely food safe, FDA approved and all that. It's really, really nice stuff. And it doesn't take a whole lot. In fact, the instructions tell you to put a light coat, a very thin coat onto the wood. I did do that. You let it sit for about an hour before you go to the next coat. Now, I did go back into this and tried to fill in a lot of the pores because I was really worried about the moisture seeping out too fast and it shaping and cracking. And I have to say that that was successful. It did change shape a little bit, not horribly, but there were no extended cracks or anything like that. So I think this varnish oil did do its job in terms of slowing down the drying process. So I was very happy with that. I also soaked the crap out of it with a bunch of walnut oil as well. Just trying to displace some of the moisture with the oil and hopefully keep the wood from pulling too tight. Now, hindsight, looking back on this, I probably should have done maybe a resin coat or a varnish of some sort that filled in the pores a little bit better and gave it more of a smoother, tactile finish. But maybe I'll do that on the next piece. We'll see how that goes. You're only limited by your imagination. There's the final look of the piece. I'm personally very happy with it. I hope that the recipient who gets this will be happy with it as well. I want to thank everybody for joining and watching. Have a great day.